Hello guys, Global Lego here, and in today's video I have another Summer 2024 LEGO Dragons Rising review, and this is of Cole's Dragon Titan mech. So this is set number 71821, contains 1055 pieces containing the exclusive Cole minifigure, and retails for $89.99 in the UK. So without further ado, let's move on. So firstly we're going to take a look at the single and exclusive minifigure of the set, and that is the brand new mech version of Cole. So we did receive a mech suit for Cole and the other Ninja earlier in the year in 2024, but this is obviously an all new version, obviously is exclusive to the set, and as of right now is the only way to get him. And none of the other Ninja, have received this style of suit, so that's another reason that makes this minifigure so unique. So obviously the standout thing about this minifigure is obviously he steps away from his typical colour that he's been using for the last 13 years, which is obviously black. His base colour actually here is white, which is a stark contrast for Cole, and obviously makes his suit stand out against the rest of his suits that he's received in past years. But obviously we get hints of black in here with the hood, because this is the same hood pieces from earlier in the year in March. But we got some cool shoulder pads here, which aren't typically used for the Ninja, but there is no back attachment, so they are just sort of shoulder pads here, moulded in orange. And obviously the main secondary colour other than black is grey and orange. As you can see on the torso detailing here, the torso is extremely futuristic and robotic. And it's sort of like, the way I like to imagine it, it's sort of like representing the actual mech itself. It sort of has like some similar aspects to the actual build does. But we see that detail continue down to the legs here, some sort of knee detailing, and as well as some sort of thigh detailing as well, more of those orange accents. And taking a look at its back printing, it's extremely detailed also, and obviously isn't covered up by any sort of back accessory. But we've got more of that sort of orange and grey sort of futuristic armour plating here, which obviously fits with the theming of the set, But as of right now, we don't know whether this minifigure will appear in the show or not, but it's really cool to get a very random but exclusive and obviously unique version of Cole. And then just taking off his hood, he's got the the head mould from the original wave of Dragon Rising set. So you got the sort of Prime Empire inspired visor design with some sort of rock detailing surrounding his eyes on the visor. And turning it around, he just has a simple sort of smiling expression. Obviously, if you want to see that with the hood, you can obviously do that. So obviously they don't really use the visor faces in the actual show, but it's a cool detail to get, and I feel like it looks really cool in this version of Cole here. If I just flip it around again, you can just see how cool that looks. And the accessories he receives is just some really cool translucent orange katana pieces. So these aren't brand new for him, but they have been received in the theme before, and I don't have any personally, so it's really nice to get these pieces. So as I just shown the minifigure, I thought it'd be fitting to show you the sense of scale between actual minifigures in this set, as obviously you can see Cole all the way down here, and you can just see how giant the set actually is, obviously with the sword and the sort of wing apparatus in the back. But I thought that'd be quite an interesting thing to look at just before we actually move on to the details. But you can just see, just from first impressions, this set is... So starting off with the legs of the build, you can see that the sort of main colour scheme from the lower half is obviously white and gold, and it starts to blend up into that dark grey and black in the sort of torso. So the sort of colour scheme goes, the sort of limbs, the lower part of the limbs rather, are in the white and orange colour, and then it sort of blends up into that obviously darker colour scheme that Cole is usually known for. Obviously the main sort of thing that people sort of praise this set for is definitely the articulation. That's excellently demonstrated through the legs alone, and obviously the other parts of the body as well, but we'll move on to that in a moment. But just taking a look at some of the detailings here, they use a lot of these sort of angled pieces here just to create the sort of shape of the knee and stuff, and these parts are actually held on by studs, so they're almost like the actual kneecaps of the build, and they've got this really cool sort of grating design on the interior there, just with some orange undertones as well, just to obviously fit with the aesthetic of this set. But that just sort of slots on the front, and obviously you can see as you bend the knee, oh sorry, I broke a piece off. As you bend the knee rather, this piece actually moves up with it. And obviously, as you saw there, that's one of the flaws I find with the set, is that a lot of pieces break off when you're trying to move the set around and stuff. That's the sort of main problem I've had recently, obviously, especially these sort of grey pieces just above the knee there. But we'll move on to the joint in more detail in a moment. And we got a little sort of sticker detailing up here around the waist. These are sort of like supposed to emulate some sort of cloth detailing if it was to be like a person or whatever, just with some of that sort of detailing that's similar to on the actual Cole minifigure. So if I bring the camera in closer, as you can see there, and the sort of pelvis area sort of forms around nicely with a lot of sort of angled details and lots of sharp corners. But turning it to the side, you can see a bit more of that leg apparatus. The sort of knee joint is really good, as it's like sort of triple reinforced with 3 ball joints in there. It's a bit difficult to see, but also this clip piece holding it in place. But that provides excellent stability, obviously, for when you're posing and sort of playing around with it, so it's not going to fall apart or loosen over time. And obviously, so it's really good to be able to bear the actual stress of the weight of the model. But we've got more of those sort of angled pieces here, just around the calf and whatever. And they've done a really cool job, similar to what they did on Kai's Climber Mech earlier in the year, is these sort of piston feet. So it obviously just provides more reinforcement for the ankle joint. And as you can see there, as you move it forward and backwards, the pistons move up and down. But yeah, that's just another great reason why this set is awesome. It's just the amount of stability and obviously the rigidity of it is really, really good. So you're never going to find this set sort of collapsing under itself, obviously, from the weight. So they've took the right measures of obviously not compromising stability for detail. But moving down here, we've got this sort of foot detailing with this sort of shoe almost. With this almost, it's like this shoe buckle with some gold detailing here and some sort of curved flat pieces. So the feet are really simple, nothing to really brag home about, but it's mostly the articulation that's really great from the legs. You've also got a separate joint here around the thigh where you can actually rotate the leg 360 degrees, just adding an extra degree of mobility in the build, and you're not restricted just to sort of the hip joint and the knees as in some other mechs, so you have some great posability options here. As I demonstrated on my Instagram, you obviously can get this thing into a variety of poses with just the legs and whatever. But yeah, it's on the simple hip joint as well, of the sort of peg pieces here, if I can show you there. And another piece fell off. So I'll talk about that in the end of the video. But yeah, that is the legs of the build, and I feel like that's probably one of the best parts of it, obviously just in terms of mobility. That now brings us obviously to the torso and the arms and the head of the build. So this is obviously where quite a lot of the detail has gone. Obviously, especially in the arm areas here, I feel like they're doing a good job here. Similar with the legs, obviously giving a good job of plenty of articulation as well as not sacrificing detail in terms of the budget or whatever. But taking a look at the chest, it's got this really sort of interesting design, almost like an Iron Man Hulkbuster kind of design with like the heart reactor in the middle. If I just move the arms out of the way so you can get a better look, it sort of protrudes further from the chest. You actually do get a cool sort of sticker detailing on each side on those sort of curved pieces there. But it just sort of protrudes further than the rest of the build, and I thought that was a really interesting design because they haven't really done it on much other mechs. You sort of see a more sort of flush sort of like armor breastplate almost. This is sort of like an actual sort of mechanical piece of the build or whatever. It has some sort of other function than just being armor. So that's really cool and obviously sets it apart from previous mechs of this size. But in terms of actual size, the torso is actually really small. I feel like a lot of the detailing comes in the legs and the arms. But as you can see here, it's on one of these rotation joints here. So you can actually spin the torso 360 degrees from the waist. So that's a really cool feature, and obviously again helps with the posability of this build, just adding to the sort of playability as well. So you're really not restricted on what you can and can't do with this build. But yeah, in terms of actual detail, there's not like a lot on the torso. I feel like, yeah, I'm going to reiterate, it's gone into the arms and legs mostly, but it fits really nicely here. It doesn't feel out of proportion at all. I feel like it fits for what they was going for with this build. But naturally, that's going to bring us then to the next part of the build you can see, which is actually the head. And they've done a really cool, again, sort of like samurai-inspired design, which you see a lot on the mechs these days, especially with the sort of ornamentation and like the crescents on the face here. But they've actually used a piece I don't have. I think this is the Moon Knight sort of, shuriken piece that he uses in the minifigure series. So that's really cool to get, and obviously fits very well here, just adorning the top of the head there. So it does almost look like it is a helmet rather than a head. But as you can see, they've used some just sort of simple sharp angles here. If I dim the light a little bit, you can just sort of see some slopes and tiles here, just sort of rounding it off. It's not overly big, but it is on a ball joint, so you can obviously move it to a certain degree, and obviously there's a ratchet joint sort of for the neck there, which I'm not going to go into much detail, but you can see how it attaches. And obviously it provides a nice bit of detail and finishes off the build nicely from the bottom to the top there. But that's then going to be the head of the build. Sorry, I'm adjusting a lot of stuff mid-video. There we go. And that's going to bring us to the actual sort of cockpit. And this is another part which I find a little bit difficult to access. And obviously there again, broken another piece off. That I do that a lot when I'm trying to move this around. So if we get our Cole here, you can see the obviously area in which he's going to sit. But because of his like shoulder pads, you have to put his arms straight down by his side and then fold his legs down, because if you try and bring his hands out a little bit like he's sort of controlling something, you can't fit him in at all. But there is 4 studs in there which you can get him on, but I find it really difficult to actually just get him on the studs, so I usually just place him in there and he's obviously nice and secure because it is quite a tight fit. But there is some studs in there as well as that sort of wedge piece to slide his feet into if you don't want to actually attach them to the studs. But that's just a minor thing. It is a little bit difficult to get your figure in there. But obviously, then again, it looks amazing. I really like how they've done it here. It's basically the same we've seen with all Lego Ninjago mechs. And then moving to the arms, if I just move these back a little bit, same sort of similar situation with the legs where they're on this ratchet joint at the shoulder, so you can obviously rotate it and move it laterally. And these shoulder pads look really cool, adding to the sort of bulk of the set. It reminds me a lot of the Quake mech from 2017 or 18. But it obviously fits with the aesthetic of Cole. Obviously, he's the Earth Ninja, so he's got to have some sort of bulk and armour to the mech. And I feel like they've accomplished that really well with these sort of massive shoulder pad pieces. And as you can see here, we've got some Nexo shield with this, again, similar to the minifigure with that sort of robotic detailing with the sort of orange veins almost going through it, like it's the power of Cole going through the mech. But obviously, again, like I mentioned earlier, you can see the colour scheme obviously centrally is black. But as you get further away, it goes from lighter to extremely light with the white. But they've done it really well in the arms, again, similar to the legs. And like the legs, at the sort of bicep and tricep area, you get another articulation joint, which is just full 360-degree rotation. So you can get extra mobility in the build. Obviously, which you don't see often in a lot of mechs these days unless they use ball joints. But obviously, I feel like with ball joints, it would be the arms are too heavy for the actual Lego joint to hold it up, so they've done a really nice compromise. Then at the elbow, and again knocked another piece off, the elbow is just on 2 separate ratchet joints, so you have 2 points of articulation there. You get one right by the bicep and one by the forearm, so you can obviously bend it in 2 opposite directions, so you can get some really nice angles with the arm there, and that's really cool. And then just coming to the arm, we got some sticker detailing just on the wrist there, with just some sort of exposed metal and stuff. Some orange detailing coming to the sort of outside of the forearm. We've got more of those angled slopes to make it look really cool and armoured. There's some, they've covered it up nicely on the bottom there, just rounding off the design. And the hand is just on a simple ball joint with a really cool Nexo shield there with another sticker. And obviously the hand is really simple, just sort of commonplace with mechs these days, using the sort of typical mech fingers. We get 3 there. A Technic pin in the middle to hold the sword and a thumb. So the arms are obviously mirrored on each side there, so they're going to be completely identical, no sort of differences between the two. But then, obviously, as you saw at the beginning of the video, it comes with a really big accessory, which is obviously his giant sword. So as you can see, this is pretty much as tall as the mech. It's obviously a bit hard to show at the moment, but I can show you in a moment. It's taller than the mech without the wings. But they used the big giant Dune helicopter thingy blade, but in gold. And the only problem I found with this one, obviously, just because of how long it is, it actually came warped in the box, so you could have probably fixed it yourself a little bit, but it is quite heavy, and obviously over time it's going to sag or whatever. But the build is really simple. It's similar to other Lego swords, but you can spin the blade around. And the way you apply it is that Technic pin in either hand, so they both have Technic pins. You just place it in and close the fingers up, and then he's ready to go. He's got his sword. So he obviously makes him look really cool with this giant sword. It would have been cool to get like a different weapon, because we always seem to get swords with mechs, but just because of the size of it, obviously makes him look really, really cool, and obviously allows for some really cool poses. But I don't feel like it detracts away from the build at all. I think it actually adds to it and makes it more cool. Then just turning me around, he has sort of like a secondary accessory. As you can see from the front, he has these big sort of wing blades at the back, and that's obviously just to increase the presence. And I feel like that was probably done just to sort of fit with a sort of dragon theme, as he's kind of like, it's called the Cole's Dragon Titan Mech. It's probably supposed to represent wings or whatever. And these are all on sort of like individual ratchet joints, so you can move these about if you want to, but they're sort of set like this in place in the instructions. But how this attaches actually, because you can remove it, is it's just connected through some Technic pins here. So you've got the Technic pins there, and it just slots into this position at the back. So the mech does look very, very naked without it on the back there, obviously, because there's quite a lot of anti-studs showing now. There's a big hole in the back. I feel like even without the wings from the front, he still looks really, really cool. And I feel like it doesn't take anything away from the mech. So you have two really cool display options there. But just taking a look at this build, so this would be the back side of it where the anti-studs are. It's just got a slope piece to cover up some studs or whatever. And obviously you can see from the front, we just got some more angled pieces just to add that, to that sort of rock aesthetic of the car. And they've got the big sort of dragon blade pieces in gold there as the wings. So yeah, that is, in sense, the actual set itself. So obviously it's sort of face value, you sort of see what you get. And there's not really much to say about it in terms of play features other than the articulation and sort of posability of it. Because that is the main feature, because there isn't any sort of like stud shoes or whatever you can use, and there's no other minifigures in the set to battle. But that's going to be all from me from now, so let's move on to the final thoughts. So overall, I definitely think this is one of the best sets of the current summer 2024 wave for Dragons Rising Season 2. Especially for the price, I feel like you're getting your money's worth here. Obviously not in the minifigure department, but I feel like it was really clear from the way this set was marketed. And obviously, as you can see from this video where you only get one minifigure, you're supposed to actually, the main focus is actually on the build rather than any sort of complementary parts. It feels like all the budget went into that one minifigure in terms of what they had for the minifigure, and they just put the rest of their thoughts and details into the actual build. I really appreciate that, because we don't obviously get that often, especially for play themes where the set's focus is obviously its sort of display and posability or whatever. And obviously the age rating for the set is obviously marketed towards a bit higher kids, but obviously anyone can get it or whatever. But I feel like that's really cool about this set. Obviously it's tailored towards sort of display almost. Because I feel like personally, from just experience of trying to pose it, a lot of the smaller pieces, especially here on the elbow as well, constantly break and fall off. So I feel like it could be really frustrating when you're trying to actually like play with it, just because the amount of pieces just pop off or whatever, like when you move one joint or whatever. And obviously it gets really frustrating, especially these pieces here, when you're trying to actually grab onto the set, because the torso is quite small, you can't really grab onto much, you always end up popping those off. But just to give you an idea of scale rather than choosing the minifigure, take Cole's mech from earlier in this year. You can see he doesn't even surpass his knee level with this one. So if you're looking for a massive giant mech and you don't have any in your collection already, this is definitely the set on the market you should get, especially for the price. It's really good, and I expect this to go on sale probably quite soon, because I actually did get it for £5 off at Smith's Toys. So if you don't want to pay the full £90 price, this set is definitely going to go on sale like most Ninjago sets do these days. But obviously, if you don't have the space or whatever, this obviously isn't one I would recommend, just because of how big it is, and obviously it's going to be difficult to display with those giant wing pieces and that sword. But overall, I really am pleased with the set. I say the only grab I have with it is obviously just a small part popping off when you're trying to pose it. But if you want to see some more LEGO videos from my channel, I will leave some on the pinned screen now, and that's going to be all from me, so peace.